progress on that goal?
I want to tell you some of my experiences living with a couple of women when I first started teaching school. I started teaching back in 1970 at the School for the Deaf in Colorado. During that time, training programs frequently didn't teach any classes in sign language. I was a graduate of one of those programs. Then they would send students to the School for the Deaf who had no previous experience with the language and often with the deaf population. When I entered the residential school for the first time to do my student teaching, I was 20 years old, and I was placed at the high school level teaching high school seniors, many who were my age. I remember walking in the classroom, seeing all of them signing and saying to my supervising teacher, "Oh my gosh, I don't know the language. What am I going to do?" And her response was, "Well, either you'll get it or you won't." I think she probably took pity on me. Now, there was a deaf woman who taught science at the school. She told me that she owned a house, rented rooms, and asked me if I'd like to rent a room and live there. She said another deaf woman who worked at the bank also rented from her, and I was more than welcome to do the same. I agreed, and that's when I moved in. This was probably one of the best experiences I've ever had. It was during the time before Caption TV, before most people had TTY machines. It was back in the day when the Deaf Club was very popular and most students went to residential schools. Back in these days, when we really had facilities for deaf people that are not as prominent as they once were today. Well, I became their interpreter 24/7. I tell my students frequently that while I learned to sign, my roommates were very patient. The three of us would go out to eat at restaurants. After about the second or third time of asking them what they'd wanted, I'd be too embarrassed to ask them again. So I would guess and order what I thought they had signed. Then, when the server brought their order and it wasn't at all what they had asked for, I'd tell them that she must have misunderstood me. I never wanted to admit that I hadn't understood what they asked for. One time while living with them, I locked myself out of the house. It was early in the morning and I still had my pajamas on. I forgot what I'd gone out to do, but anyway, I just can't remember that. When I went out, the door locked behind me. I stood out there for what seemed to be an eternity, pounding on the windows with a shovel handle, trying to get their attention so they'd let me back in. Finally, one of them saw the dogs barking. She didn't hear the dogs, she saw it because I was making such a racket. She looked out, saw me, and let me back in. I'm sure I was quite a spectacle for all of the neighbors. I also recall the time, probably my very first experience, when they had a party and I was the only hearing person there. It was definitely being in the minority. I was a little slower to catch the jokes, and everyone would laugh, and I would have to sit on the side and have to process a little bit longer before I finally got it. This was a marvelous experience. We lived together for about a year before I went back to work on my master's. It's an experience that I'll always cherish. I learned a great deal. I would recommend this to anyone, regardless how many classes you've taken or how much education you have, that you get out and socialize in the deaf community. because this is truly where you learn the language. We can teach you the grammar and the syntax and the rules of the language in the classroom, but until you really get a chance to use it in a conversational sense, it doesn't really become your own. I don't think so. So don't ever hesitate to enter new groups, go to new places, and use the skills that you have. Mine certainly developed having the opportunity to talk with native users and have them be patient enough to work with me as I started to learn the language.